Hey guys, welcome to the AP English podcast. I am Eric Kallenborn, and first of all, thank you guys who have subscribed and have waited a little bit for this. It's been a rough month with the holidays and everything, getting this podcast up and running, and then we presented up at NCTE, which is primarily what this podcast is about. But we're back, and I have this episode for you all ready to go, and then I have another one that's queued up for 2 weeks that will come out from 2 weeks from the air date of this one too. So we're back in business. So I hope you enjoy this episode. This episode comes from our trip to NCTE and our presentation about using graphic novels to teach characterization and inference in the classroom. I won't talk too much about it here because Ronell and I really get into what we had presented at the conference, and we had an awesome time, thanks to Gareth Hinds one more time, which we actually thank him again in the actual episode. So Gareth, great books. Thank you so much for presenting with us, and we look forward to working with you in the future. So we hope you guys enjoy this AP English podcast, The APE, about characterization, inference, and comics in your classroom. Enjoy. There we go. All right, everybody, welcome to the APE AP English podcast. This is Eric Kallenborn from Shepherd High School, with you today with Ronell Whitaker from Eisenhower High School at Community High School District 218. What's up, Ronell?
What's happening?
Nothing much, man. We presented this past weekend at NCTE in Boston with Gareth Hinds, illustrator and graphic novelist. Awesome dude. And we also presented with Mike Jacobson, our curriculum director. And we had some audio being recorded at the actual conference, but the audio was not the quality that we wanted it to be. So we actually decided to just come back on Monday, touch base with everybody, let you know how our presentation went, give you some ideas of a few things that you can use in your AP classroom, and give you a recap, which is probably better this way anyway, because most of our presentation was looking at slides on the computer anyway.
Really visual medium, I think.
Right. So now we're with the focus of actually, doing the audio for audio's sake here. This should work really well. So basically what we want to kind of do is just give you an overview of what we did, which was teaching inference and characterization through graphic novels and comics. We did the session was for all sorts of levels, so basic level freshmen up until AP level juniors. But we're gonna kind of tailor this discussion here with you today about how you could use this stuff for your AP classroom. And Ronald doing some really cool things in his classroom with comics, and I'm going to let him talk a little bit about the apps that he's using, because we have tablets. Him and I have tablets in our classroom that we're able to use. So Ronald, can you tell us a little bit about the things you've been doing with Garrett's Romeo and Juliet?
Yeah, we were lucky enough to pilot this one-to-one device thing in our district, and we've been using these Android tablets to kind of, just really buttress our instruction. So we can't really annotate comics. At least you don't want to annotate comics. Like the nerd in me says, don't write in my comics. Right. But that's a skill our kids need. And I have pretty reluctant readers in my sophomore English class. So we got these two programs, Evernote, which is a note-taking program, which is really, really amazing. If you are someone who wants to give your kids the opportunity to take notes and have access to those notes electronically, anywhere they have a PC or a phone, we would use Evernote for that. And to pair with that, there's this app called Sketch, which you can use to annotate photographs, and if you pay for it, PDFs too, which has been great for us in our class. But what we did was... You guys have a paid subscription to... I have a paid subscription, and right now I have my kids using a premium preview. Okay. So what I've been doing is giving them PDFs to annotate electronically, and they love it. It's so tactile, and it's kind of what we're getting to here. So we were trying to teach them, how to identify characterization, what the author does, especially as a comics artist would do. And comics are different. They can characterize through their character models, as well as through things like using color and things like that. So I have my kids trying to find any kind of images that jumped out to them they thought were good for, getting to the characterization of a character. And we used Gareth Hinds' Romeo and Juliet to do that. If you don't know what Sketch is, you can take a picture of anything, you can draw on it, you can highlight it. It has these little icons you can add to any photo that, funny enough, seem to be modeled after active reading icons. They have a exclamation point, a question mark, a check mark, a heart, all these things that you would use to draw attention to, something about the picture. So one of the things I had my kids do was just to test out how to annotate was to like take a picture of a panel in the book. And the first one we did was in the first scene of the play, if you're familiar with it, where the two servants are talking about, what they would do if they ever captured or ran across any Montagues. And there's the whole, I will force the maidens against the wall and take their heads. And Gareth does this really cool thing with the imagery of the maidenhead, and the characters are talking with one another, and Gareth draws in like this cherry, and then he does this onomatopoetic pop there too. My kids had I had a couple kids who had a field day with that because like they were giggling like, he's popping cherries. But that's how I got my kids in. I mean, I know it's kind of juvenile, but it's how I got my kids into it, and they were able to highlight that as an image that stood out to them. So they were really into the imagery part of it. Also, they had to highlight any kind of text that kind of gets to imagery as well. And that would be the best example I could think of with that was when we were reading Mercutio's big speech when he was talking to Romeo, and really their whole interchange.
Was that a couple of the images that you used in your presentation?
Yeah. I used early on in the book. There's a scene where he actually, and I didn't put too much of that one in there. I just put the one when he's talking to Benvolio. But there's a scene where he describes the Queen Mab speech, and there's this back and forth. And actually, Gareth talked about that scene when we were with him. But when my kids were going through it, they were highlighting that interplay. Like they got to the idea that Mercutio is like kind of this jokester, trickster character. And that's sophisticated for sophomores, man. I mean, they got that his language was playful in the sense for two reasons. One of my kids said that he was trying to pull his friend out of this funk he was in, which is exactly what he was doing. But also another kid pointed out that this guy doesn't take anything seriously, which was really cool because this is not a translation, if you guys don't know. This Romeo and Juliet is traditional Shakespearean language.
It's possible, like it's relatively new, right? It just came out like a couple months ago.
Yeah, we ordered it, like pre-ordered it basically.
Right.
So my kids were able to, using images, kind of make some context out of this character. Oh, he's kind of playful. He's always joking around. There's an image here that we have in our PowerPoint. I think it would be a good idea for you to maybe, figure out a way to put on a page of some sort. So
you could probably post it on the YouTube link.
Post on the YouTube link would be really cool. There's an image here where my kids pointed out Mercutio is talking to Benvolio. And if you've read the play, there's a point where he's kind of teasing Benvolio about being the kind of guy that wouldn't want to pull his sword out, or walks down with a sword but wouldn't want to fight. There's a moment in the book where Mercutio is kind of like striking this fighting pose, but his shadow was doing something completely different. Mm-hmm. And this was a really cool thing that I thought Gareth put in there. My kids caught it immediately, and they said this kind of shows the dual sides of Mercutio, this mercurial nature. And I think that's something that you can't get even in a play version of this story. Even Baz Luhrmann couldn't have, as crazy as he is about visuals, he couldn't have pulled something like this off, which I thought was really interesting.
Well, one of the things too about the actual graphic novel, we talked about this at our presentation as well, is that it doesn't, like, a movie keeps moving, a television show the stream keeps going. It's constantly hitting your eyes with multiple visuals. But in the graphic novel, once that book is opened to that page, you can't not see it. Like, it's just there until you turn that page. So it allows you to take in, as long as you want, to take in that image.
Or, especially for the purposes of this podcast, to examine and closely read. I mean, it's not just that it won't go away, it's the fact that it stays there and you can put under a microscope, which is kind of cool, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
We also talked about, there's this really cool image where, I don't know, I think it's earlier than this.
I think it's this one, right?
Yeah. I was talking to Gareth during the presentation. I kind of want to pull this out. We've never really seen Rosaline in any, version of this play, ever.
Right.
And I like that in order to kind of give us an idea of what it means to get over Rosaline, Gareth draws this panel of the image of Rosalind being shattered in Romeo's mind the second that he sees Juliet. And from what I know, at least, I mean, I looked it up. This is probably the only visual we've ever gotten of her at all. So, I mean, it's kind of cool that he's able to do something like that. Mm-hmm. My kids, using Sketch, they drew an arrow to this image, and they pointed out how he quickly forgot Rosalind as he got this love at first sight, which is like a huge trope in Romeo and Juliet. I can't say enough about Sketch as far as annotating images. Have you used it for regular text as well? Yeah, we have. Well, we use it for different reasons. Before I could figure out how to put a PDF in Sketch, I had kids taking pictures of like regular text, and that seemed like overkill. The whole point was that I'm trying to eliminate paper as much as I can. Right. But once I gave them a PDF file, and they were like annotating on the screen using Sketch, and then they were able to save that, and they're able to access that anywhere. Like I had a kid whose mom got him a smartphone because she saw what we were doing with this. She was like, "Well, I gotta have my kid." Wow. The ability, which is cool, insane. I mean, not that he needed a smartphone, but yeah, they did. Now he has it, and he can go home and say, "Oh, this is that story we were reading." I can pull it up at any time. Can't ever say he lost his story or lost his book, because it's like, no, we have it, and it's stored in his Evernote account until he deletes it. So cool.
Is there the Sketch app on the phones, though? Mm-hmm. It's probably not as, because we use it on the tablets, but on the phone, I mean, because the screen's so small, would you say that, like, do you see kids using Sketch on their phone? Is it hard to work with on there?
No, man, same deal. I mean, if anything, these kids, that's their native way of looking at anything on their phone. So for them, it's just as easy as I zoom into the story and just read it that way. Okay. So no, yeah, I think they'd be even more at home. That was the buy-in for them. It was the idea that they can take it on their phone and get it, and still be able to turn their work in on time and not have to be beholden to these tablets.
I know a lot of my students were doing a compare contrast essay with Romeo and Juliet right now, mm-hmm. and they love Evernote just because they can access that anywhere. So on their phone and their home computer, it's kind of, and then they'll have like a specific notebook saved for Romeo and Juliet, a specific notebook saved for Beowulf or whatever we're working on.
And the use of tags. Yeah. The ability to tag notes and be able to, because then you can make it searchable. Like that's new wave stuff, man. I think we're really on the cusp. There was like this really big push at NCTE. I almost called it something else. Another thing we're trying to get into, that it's all about preparing kids with 21st century skills. And I think we're kind of ahead of people in using Evernote, just using any kind of notation system on a tablet or electronic. I think is giving these kids like a leg up on other people, I think. The other thing that I want to kind of point out with comics and what I talked about with characterization that didn't quite, I don't think, translate as well, was the idea that the artist has to have a very specific idea of character model in hand. It works best when you have an artist and a writer who know who their character is. Gareth, I think, did a really good job of making this particular thing. Sorry, guys.
We're going to put pause. Got it. Oh, we don't have to pause it. All right. That's our publishers calling us. Yeah. of making a really clear representation of the characters. Like, you know who Romeo is, you know who Mercutio is, and by doing that, my kids kind of felt like they were at the play, which I thought was an awesome way of looking at this thing. Yeah, that is pretty cool. But yet, because it's drawn, you can do things like mess with Mercutio's shadow, where it looks different than he looks in his posing. And this goes back to also your kids probably breeze through this play as quickly as mine did, but still grasped the concepts, the themes, the motifs, the symbolism with probably more ease than if they were to just have read the play. And with that speed, we're able to kind of spend our time with that book and go back and closely look at stuff. Like, the problem I think most high schools run into with Shakespeare stuff is not only the language, but the time it takes to tell kids what is happening when we're reading this. Right. I didn't have to do too much of that. I mean, I had like kids who I thought were some of my lowest kids, like, getting it
immediately. And I don't want to sell this as like a magic bullet. It's just one of those things where they just grasped it, and it was a thing I didn't have to do too much front loading for it. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I've stressed, I haven't said it on an episode of the podcast yet, maybe I have, but the idea that these graphic novels, when we're talking about AP essays, it's basically thematic. If we're talking about an essay or a work, we're talking about it thematically. So for the simple fact that no matter what level these kids are, they read a graphic novel, they can kind of grasp it and be able to talk about it with just as much fluency and accuracy and intelligence as if they had read the actual play. And I stick to my guns when I say that, and I know a lot of traditionalists are not about that, and they really don't like the idea of a graphic novel. But I think if you're a traditionalist, especially with Shakespeare, I think you kind of have to like the graphic novel adaptations of the plays.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a problem with a graphic novel adaptation of Beowulf, I guess I could see your point against it a little bit more than I can the play, because the plays are meant to be watched. Shakespeare didn't write his plays to be read in a high school classroom, right? He wrote his plays so that we could watch them, to be performed. And what Gareth does here, and a lot of he's done a few other Shakespeare plays as well, is that he just allows the students and the teachers to kind of be an audience to the play and kind of see it at their own pace, which I really dig.
You know what else kind of jumped off for me, and I know we want to get to the whole recap. Gareth made and again, we talk about what an artist can do, and I hope we're not just selling Gareth's comics. That was part of what we were doing, was talking about his comics. An artist can make choices that you can talk about just as much as you would literature. Mm-hmm. I mean, plenty of English teachers, and I would even think, from what I remember from the AP, you have to be able to examine many different artifacts, and pieces of art are just as valid there. So you can look at the choice that an artist made, and Gareth made a choice to make his cast multiracial. Like, that was a choice, and it wasn't like it was a comment on racism. It was just a comment on the universality of the themes of this play, which I thought, was interesting, because my kids immediately glommed onto the idea of, Romeo is African American and Juliet is Indian. I'm thinking Indian. I mean, and I think he even said he was trying his best to not to pick two groups that weren't historically
right. Because if you would have made her
opposition.
Hispanic, then it might have been like, well, African Americans, Hispanic, or whatever, however you wanted to argue that,
or black and white, or
making her Indian kind of changes that dynamic a little bit, which is it's a cool choice, a really cool choice of his,
Yeah, and again, we get to the idea of choice, we get to the idea of intent and purpose, and I liked having that conversation with my kids.
Gareth was, and like Ryan said, we're not here selling books for him, and like Mike Jacobson, our curriculum director, said, this isn't like these books. Like we were using his books before we were even in touch with him to present with him at NCTE. We just, as far as he basically does the classics, and he does them really well. So, when I my initial, I guess, exposure to Beowulf, as I said in the presentation, I was waiting for my wife at the doctor, and I was looking for a book to read on my way there. So at the library, I picked up. I was trying to get exposure to some new graphic novels. I picked up the Beowulf, and I was just super impressed by the storytelling and the art of Gareth's books. And I knew my kids were going to be into it, and that's the likability, the relatability, the readability of a graphic novel, and being able to allow your students to kind of experience that. We also, Mr. Jacobson also talked about the literary merit of those books, and the literary merit of the storytelling in general, which I encourage all AP teachers to use graphic novels in the classroom in order to teach those things. What do you think, Ronald, about like our overall experience at NCTE? What do you think were a couple of the more memorable moments that we're going to take away from that?
First, I hope that people who came to see us are actually listening right now, because I want to say a very heartfelt thank you. My biggest moment was in the middle of, I don't know if it was me, I think it was you who was speaking. And then, we had a standing room in our 75-person capacity room. And then all of a sudden, this guy comes in and starts opening the dividing
the
walls,
partition,
partition. And in the other room, there are people just already seated, as if like waiting to unveil this our presentation. Man, I thought that was really cool. I was really happy to see so many people are interested, not only in, of course, Gareth's work, but using comics in the classroom. Like when we were getting questions, it wasn't Gareth. It was like, hey, how are you guys doing this?
Yeah.
How's it working? I thought that was the most rewarding thing, from NCTE for me.
For sure. And, he was awesome too, working with Gareth and presenting with him. Really, really cool dude. If you don't know his work, you can check out his work at GarethHinds.com. Mm-hmm. And he also he publishes with Candlewick Publishing. So if you go to, I think it's candlewickpress.com. If you Google Candlewick Press, you'll be able to find it. And they house all his books there. So he also self-publishes books as well. So check him out, check out his stuff, and you'll be able to use it. I know other experiences too at the convention. Besides people it was really cool, and also I want to second that to thank everybody who came and supported what we were doing there.
Yeah.
And if you need anything as far as graphic novels go, you can email me. My email address is whichever venue you are listening to this podcast on. It should have my email address on there, and I can put you in touch with. If you have questions administratively, I can put you in touch with our curriculum director, because we were a couple people in the crowd who asked questions about being able underfunded districts being able to afford those books, and there's grants available for certain people if you look in the right places. I can put you in touch with our curriculum director to answer some of those questions, or just settling the minds of administration that may think that there is no place in the classroom for a graphic novel. I think we've been so lucky to just be part of a district that is super accepting of anything. What did we start with? And we started with Mouse. I think Mouse was the first graphic novel that we used a few years back, maybe 7-8 years, maybe 9 at this point. And then I think we went to Ultimate Spider-Man, which was kind of crazy. But I had, and what was your experience as far as 'cause I know a lot of people who read comics or who think about comics in a negative way think that females aren't going to get into this genre.
Okay, well, let me tell you my story. I started with Spider-Man. That was my choice to start with Spider-Man.
That was your intro into teaching graphics?
Yeah. And, I've given kids graphic novels, but this was my first, hey, we're going to teach this as a text. And man, listen, I had girls get into it. I think Spider-Man was the best pick for both girls and boys, and we did that consciously. Mm-hmm. Of course, we played with the stereotypes that girls won't get into it, so we picked up a book that kind of Marvel plays up the character element and the human element more than anybody does. So our girls, man, they dug into that book, dude. And I did this with, again, I tend to handle the reluctant readers, the lower level kids, and they dug into it and they were able to write about it. And the thing I learned from using graphic novels, at least this first time, was my kids were only supposed to have to write a paragraph about characterization. But since we finished that book within a week, mm-hmm. we did the paragraph thing. And I said, well, let's try some other writing. And we got a full-on thematic writing about theme, symbolism, and character. When they weren't supposed to have to write about that for months. That was extremely rewarding at that point.
Right.
And then on top of that, it opened girls up, I think, to other graphic novels too, which was awesome. I was able to give them recommendations. They wanted to read more of that stuff.
I had one of my students who was an AP student she was an AP. This was sophomore year. But when I introduced Spider-Man, I don't know if you got the same reaction, but some of the girls and some of the kids were like, "We're reading a comic book. Are you serious? This is an honors class and we're reading a comic book?"
Yeah.
And by the end, it seemed like every single person in that class was turned around. I got a couple notes from kids, a girl in particular who was like, Mr. Callenborn, thank you so much for having us read this. She's like, I never thought I would enjoy a comic as much. And they really got into the character and the relationship, and being able to not just, I don't know. There's something about the images where the brain, studies have shown that the brain process images 60,000 times faster than text. Mm-hmm. So it's just this, I think students get more of a gratification sometimes from looking at images than they would just reading that particular book. And I don't think they understand that until they really get into one and start reading that.
It's more relaxed too.
Yeah.
Like kids were able to, they almost felt like, okay, I can do this. I can read this. I'm not reading, and of course you have AP kids, so of course they have that confidence to be able to read it. But to have this, I think, and maybe you'll agree, your AP kids were now able to say, oh, this is a thing I can just kind of chill out and read it and still be able to talk about this thing as if it were this high level thing. So I get to dig deep into Spider-Man. Like,
yeah,
I do that any day of the week.
For sure. And I think it's amazing when you allow the students to just discuss this as if they were discussing literature, and you see the level of understanding that they come at it with. I always find that, so fascinating, because you can't not have thoughts about an image. You cannot read a text. So if I assign Wuthering Heights, you cannot read that, and you can look at every page and have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
But if I assign the graphic novel, you can't not see those characters. Like, you'll get part of the story without reading it, even if you're just looking at the pictures, because it's shouting at you.
Yeah.
And
I'm a testament to that, because I am the one who did not read Wuthering Heights. But I went back and revisited stuff like that and Pride and Prejudice in the graphic novel form, and I can't say I fully enjoyed it, but I can say, oh yeah, I get this story, I understand what's happening, and I kind of liked it better in that way.
I get it. Like when you say I get it, and I think that's what the kids, even who don't learn, are not like, wow, that's the greatest thing I ever read. They're like, well, at least I get it, and it's not, and it's with like a quarter of the effort. They're getting it with a quarter of the effort, which is fantastic. And I mentioned that when we were at NCTE this past weekend, on Friday presenting. I mentioned that when my students did use Beowulf on one of the AP tests we wrote this year, they sounded just like they had read the actual text. Mm-hmm. So these kids are responding to, and we did, what did we do? We did a class. We did a couple classics. I think it was,
I think we said Pride and Prejudice.
Pride and Prejudice. We have a class set of Pride and Prejudice. And when I did a Socratic seminar on, and I have video clips and audio clips of it. So if anybody's interested in hearing or seeing that, shoot me an email. We did Socratic seminars with that book, and you would have thought that they were talking about the novel. Like there
That's
was,
awesome.
They weren't even talking about the images per se. They were just talking about the themes that were brought up from Pride and Prejudice. The dealing with like feminism and all of those things, and those conversations were just absolutely fantastic without even one mention of an image. Even so, the students are getting the symbolism and the themes of the stories without even reading any of the text.
I think there's a certain legitimacy that they have, as well as the kid who read the actual text. Like, that kid still read Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah. And
he can still say, or she can still say, I read Beowulf. Like, I read it. I mean, for the same reason that I can tell you, I finally read, like a Moby Dick or something. Like that, if it's in a graphic novel version, man, I'll be able to get through it and get it. I've never wanted to read the what's that? The HBO show R.R. Martin, whatever that
Game of Thrones.
That never wanted to read because it's like it's so much. There's a graphic novel version of it. Read. I was thinking, okay, this is good. Now I may go and read the other ones because it's like I'm into the story now. I get that universe, and I think that's a thing that people don't understand is that comics writers are all about universe building. Like, that's their deal. And they have to be able to get across a lot of it in a very short amount of time because it's image and text. So with that in mind, there's this crisp and conciseness that comes along with it, as well as this multiple literacy modes that kids have to, and readers have to exercise in order to get them. I mean, if you're going to downplay, comics, that's as crazy as like an artist downplaying science. It's like, dude, no. This, Richard Feynman once said, artists or science doesn't preclude me from, understanding the beauty of a flower. If anything, it adds to it. Like, it adds to the idea that there's more going on than just what this flower looks like aesthetically.
Yeah.
I think a comic adds to the idea of what they can get from a story. It doesn't take away from it because there's less text to get there.
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. That's awesome. Before we conclude here, I just kind of want to just touch upon a couple other things we did at NCTE.
Yeah.
I know we stopped at
We actually have a little bit more time. So
okay, cool.
Yeah.
You were at a session, and we went to me and Mike went to Membeam, which is membean.com. It's a vocabulary building website. I would suggest that everybody. I don't know if you've checked them out yet.
Yeah, I did.
You guys, if you are interested in vocabulary building with your AP courses, check out membeam.com. Get some trial subscriptions. And we're actually going to purchase subscriptions, I think, for our kids next year. I'm not, like I said, anything we promote, it's not because people are paying for it or, these are honestly things that we found
that work.
So, and, vocabulary building is such a big thing. We'll probably have a later podcast on just that. But check out membean.com and see if that works for your kids. What was anything else that stuck out to you, like on the show floor, that you thought was pretty cool?
Scholastic has this thing called Class Manager that I kind of, I want to dig into. Especially, again, if you are in a class that's, doing the whole one-to-one thing or the BYOD thing, bring your own device thing. Or if you just want to find a way to communicate with parents better, this thing's like a really cool way to share what's going on in your classroom. It's real-time, like text/email to parents. It's kind of like incorporating the user interface of like a Twitter or a Hootsuite, but making it, for your classroom. I like the idea of being able to use that to kind of shoot out to my kids, like a Socratic seminar question or a discussion question, like real time as they're reading the story. Also, Max Brooks has a new book coming out about the Harlem Hellfighters that I'm really, 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 really interested in getting. I think that really jumped out at me.
Was that out yet, or was that just
no?
That was a promo copy they had.
Yeah, I pre-ordered it.
When does it come out?
April, I want to say.
Okay,
April
so you got a little bit of time to wait.
You know what else struck me, and I think you might talk about this too, was the that Storymatic card game.
What was it called? Was it Storymatic?
I feel like it was.
Where like you pull cards and you create a character, and then there's so two cards that develop your character, and then one card. It's like an improv kind of game for storytelling. If you're into writing fiction, that was pretty neat. You draw two cards for the character, one card for a conflict, and then so it might have been like a mime and what was it? A mime garbage man from the South.
No, my favorite one, and you pulled it, and I thought it was insane. He pulled two cards. One was graffiti writer, and the other one was storm chaser. So that means that character is a graffiti writing storm chaser.
Yeah. And
then like you would pull like a situation card or a card that's the problem that the character has to deal with, like he has daddy issues or something. It's like it's really cool jumping off point for students if you want them to get in the narrative story writing. I thought it was really cool. Yeah,
that was pretty neat. That was really cool.
What about you?
I just get overwhelmed at those conventions. The show floor, there's just like so much going on.
Yeah.
We picked up Boxer and Saints.
Thank you so much. That's I cannot wait to get into this book.
Yeah. If you want to, have you done American Born Chinese in your classroom?
Yeah, we did American Born Chinese in our classroom. It's from Jean Luen Yang. If you're going to get into teaching graphic novels in the classroom, American Born Chinese is, at this point, it's canon.
Yeah.
It's a multiple award-winning book. I don't want to go so far as to say Pulitzer, but it is. I feel like it did win something crazy like that. It won the National Book Award.
Yeah.
And actually it was one of the first graphic novels to do that. Amazing book. Along with Mouse, it's like you have to.
Those are the Persepolis is up there too.
Yeah.
But the thing about American Born Chinese that I really like is that it really hits kids on every level. Mm-hmm. So if you're teaching freshmen, lower level kids, or AP juniors or seniors, each group of those is going to take something completely different from it. There's levels to that book that are just indescribable. So if you haven't read American Born Chinese, check it out. The author is fantastic. The art is really cool. It's slick. And the storytelling is just fantastic there.
And Gene Yang is not one of those guys who clouds his pages with a ton of art and scenery. He wants his characters and his story to stand, and I think that's really cool. Boxers and Saints is his take on the Boxer Rebellion, which I cannot wait to get into.
Yeah, and it's historical fiction. So, if your kids end up reading Boxers and Saints, it's 2 books.
Yeah.
It's 2 different perspectives on the rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids are going to learn about that particular time in history, so they can use it for an intro in an essay. They can use it as one of their examples in an essay like that. They're just going to expand their knowledge base in all levels from reading a book like that.
I think I want to go back and touch really quick before we get out of here. The idea of what you said at the convention, I think during our presentation, actually, you pointed out the idea that you could have a kid have this wealth of knowledge from reading graphic novels. Mm-hmm. Like, you could have a kid be introduced to a wide range of just Shakespeare. I think there's maybe 12 out that I know are very good. No Fear Shakespeare has a Hamlet that's really cool.
Yeah.
Gene Yang has 5. Gareth Hinds has about 5 books. He has Merchant of Venice. Is it Richard or is it the other?
He has Merchant of Venice is out there. It's man, why can't I think of it now? It's not.
It's not Henry. It's not Richard.
No, he's got Macbeth coming out. Macbeth is in the works right now. So it's Romeo and Juliet. King Lear.
King Lear is what it is.
King Lear, yeah.
He has a ton of these books out. He's done the Odyssey.
The Odyssey is epic too. It's a big one.
Yeah. So you could give your kids a wealth of exposure without having to, I don't want to say waste time, but expend the time that you could be using a little bit more wisely with coaching them up for the test.
Yeah, you could do 3 to 4 books in the span it would take you to do one of those just text. Mm-hmm. And I get bagged on sometimes for talking about playing up the speed at which we can grasp those.
Yeah.
But I could do a graphic novel course and put those kids up to essay writing to any teacher who just read the actual text, and say my kids will probably be able to write just as fluently about these topics as your kid.
And have a wider or bigger bag of tricks to pull from.
Absolutely.
Because, the idea that those kids could compare works now is amazing.
Yeah. All right, Ron, now listen, I want to thank you for hanging out with me and kind of doing this little recap of our presentation.
No problem, man. It was a great experience. Boston was amazing. They were nice people.
Yeah, completely. Food was good. Food was awesome. And Gareth Hinds, once again, we want to thank him for presenting with us, and check out his works for sure at GarethHinds.com, or check out CandlewickPress.com, and check out his books, local library, if you want to sample them, see what's going on. And, we encourage you to contact us if you have any other questions. If you want a graphic novel full list that we've used in our classrooms, we'd be happy to get that to you. And thanks for listening. Once again, guys, we'll see you next time, and we're going to be talking about performance-based assessments in the AP Language and Composition class. See you later. So that's our episode on using graphic novels to teach inference and characterization in the AP classroom. If any of you guys have any questions on how to use graphic novels, or a full list of graphic novels I used both in my AP Language or AP Literature class, I can get that to you. Just shoot me an email in the you'll be able to find my email in the message section of whatever avenue you use to download or stream our podcast. And we thank you for listening. And in 2 weeks, we will have a brand new episode for you focusing on performance-based assessments. And that one's going to be pretty cool, going over a couple really cool projects we're doing in our classes as well. So stay tuned, subscribe, spread the word. The APE. Thanks a lot.